I hate the term self-taught artist. And in this bitter comic artist rant, I'm going to tell you guys why. And hopefully, by the end of this rant, you'll agree with me. I bet that got your attention, right? Like, whew, that is a loaded gun. That is a spicy take, right? So let me make it clear. I don't have any problem with people self-educating. That's the point of this YouTube channel. That's the point of the blog before. Self-education can be a wonderful thing, and continuing education can be extremely helpful for anybody who is interested in art. I hate the term self-taught because it's a lie. So I'm gonna give you guys a few stories, some examples. I do not have a script and I have ADHD, so we'll see how well this goes. But I've been thinking about it a lot because it comes up a lot. So if you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I'm Becca Hilburn. I am a watercolor comic artist and illustrator. I make the comics 7-inch Kara. For the purposes of today's discussion, I hold 2 degrees in art. My first degree was from a local college, the University of New Orleans, and that was in hypermedia, which is digital art. My second degree is a master's degree in fine art from SCAD in sequential art, so that means comics, picture books, that sort of thing. I don't hate the term self-taught artist because I have all of that education. In fact, for most of my life, I had to be self-taught. This is why I hate the term. So when I was first learning, back in my day, way to date myself, the internet wasn't what it is now. It wasn't quite just text-based, but it also wasn't as image and video heavy as it is now. Think 2000, 2005. And there really were not a lot of drawing resources available online. I can think of Jay Dillon's How to Draw Anime and Manga tutorials, which I printed out and had in a binder and followed to the best of my ability. And the art blog was starting to become a thing, but it wasn't what it is now. Also, Oikaki was starting to be a thing. So the art internet was starting to develop, but we had LiveJournal and DeviantArt instead of like Facebook, X, Blue Sky, anything like that. So online art resources were hard to come by. Online educational resources to pursue art were hard to come by. And I grew up in a small town that had a, let's just say, limited art section in the library. Very, very, very limited. And I checked out what I could, but there wasn't much. So, another thing. I thought that copying in any instance whatsoever was bad and wrong, even for study in my sketchbook to learn. This is not the case. Copying to learn is something people have done for centuries. That's what master studies are. You just don't present it as your own thing. So I was this kid who didn't really have access to art education, who didn't have access to art education materials, and didn't have access to the art education utopia that the internet can be at times. So basically, I learned through trial and error. And I had to teach myself a lot of things, and I mistaught myself a lot of things. And my art did not progress for about 10 years. Progress was just real without guidance, mentorship, without good resources. I wasn't growing. My art was staying stagnant. It wasn't until I went to college and could get access to formal art education, and this is talking about me, not talking about anyone else. This isn't a judgment on anyone else. If you pursue a different degree, good on you. We all come to art through different paths. But it wasn't until I could get that guidance in that direction, and I also had access to a library that had a better selection of art. It wasn't great, but it was better than what I'd grown up with. A better selection of art books, and the internet had started to change by then. There were more sites where people would share these kind of resources, where they would share PDFs and they would share links, and this was kind of the heyday of the art blog, and artists at that point in time really liked to talk about their inspirations and their resources and their favorite art books to help other artists. So that was when I could start actually making progress and growing and learning. It wasn't until I left this vacuum, small town, no other art friends environment and went into a arguably not significantly better, but still much better than what I'd known environment that I could start to grow and develop. So, and even when I was in undergrad and graduate school, there was a lot of self-directed learning. My undergraduate program didn't have an illustration department. The figure drawing and perspective drawing classes were really aimed at like any major could take those classes. So we had a lot of business majors who didn't want to do the assignments. So they couldn't crack down on those students. So the rest of us just kind of didn't get that much of an education. So there was a lot of me looking at Andrew Loomis and looking at Glenn Vilppu and reading the Watson and Guptill books and looking at tutorials that were starting to become a thing online, which hugely inspired me in the work that I do now, because I want to say thank you for all of that. And I had to spend a lot of time directing my own art education in my time outside of class if I wanted to see any improvement. And when I was in graduate school, I went for comics, and I really did get a lot of education in comics. I got a lot of education in writing for comics. I got a lot of education in the different types of comics and in pacing and storytelling and panel use and how to talk to other artists and how to talk to editors and how to comport myself in a more professional manner. And it also helped me develop, like, being in critiques helped me develop a critical eye. And I say that in a positive way, to look at my work and find ways to improve it, to look at other people's work and help them improve it. So I do think, I sincerely think, in-person art classes of some capacity, whether it is an art club, whether it is a free library art class, whether it is a community education class, whether it is an inexpensive class at your local college, whether it's a group of you and your friends and you all work to teach each other new things and make art together. I do actually think in-person art guidance, group, and education is hugely helpful for anyone who wants to make progress in their art. I'm not saying you have to pay money for it. I'm not saying it has to be led by a professor, but that group together in person, working to help each other out, working to help each other grow, is monumental. So even when I was at SCAD, while I got an education in comics, I didn't get an education in watercolor. A good friend of mine and one of my professors taught me how to watercolor and also pointed me in the direction of resources online, as well as what art supplies to buy at the art supply store that would help me learn and grow and develop. So even though I didn't have a formal education in watercolor, I still refuse to call myself self-taught, because that negates the value of what my friend put into it, what my teacher put into it, who this was not a class he was teaching. I just liked watercolor and he did watercolor professionally and he wanted to help me out. And the resources that I utilized in my development. So I hate the term self-taught artist because it negates all of the other people who are involved in your education. Unless you're Edward Gorey and you developed your art completely in a vacuum, unless you were the cave painters who first came up with art to begin with, self-taught is a huge misnomer. We're always learning from each other. If you read comics, and by the way, if you want to make comics, you should be voraciously reading comics of all types, web comics, manga, superhero comics if you want to, indie comics, zines, minis. There's a world of comics out there, and as you're making your comic or thinking about making your comics, you should be a comics fan. As creatures with these eyes that take in the world around us, we're always taking in influence and inspiration. We're always cataloging what we see. We're always finding schemas to depict the world, to explain it to other people. So by looking at other people's art and being influenced, you're still not self-taught. You're picking up things that you like from their art and bringing it into your art. So the whole self-taught thing is a little bit like the self-made man myth, where we find out that it's really like the millionaire son of a billionaire, or somebody whose family had the business for a really long time. There are a few examples of self-made people, but there's such a tremendous amount of luck and charisma involved that it is not worth pursuing, but it is almost ridiculous to think your life is going to go that way. When it comes to the self-taught artist, it is ridiculous to pursue it. You have the entire internet at your disposal. You have libraries where you can request books. You have other artists that you can reach out to either in person or online through communities. You do not have to be with your blinders on and not interact and not engage with other artists. Other artists heavily encourage you to interact and engage. It is supposed to be a community. So I don't like the term because it is completely a misnomer. There are very few modern artists who are self-taught. There are many artists whose education is self-directed, who utilize the internet, who utilize the library, who copied from their favorite books in order to learn, who took heavy inspiration from the things that they are a fan of, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Here, I want to encourage you to do that, and I try to share the resources to help make that happen. But I think to help make that happen, we have to get rid of the word self-taught artist. So y'all might be like, well, Becca, any reasonable adult knows that that's not what's really going on. Y'all, I teach. I know for a fact that there are very intelligent teenagers who believe it and very intelligent adults who would like to get in art and believe it because their favorite art influencers have tossed that word around. I'm saying I hear the term self-taught artists coming up from a very specific group of artists who have a lot of influence and whose audience are aspirational artists. They would like to get into making art. They're maybe a little bit older. They might have a couple of kids. They don't have a lot of free time. They don't really think they have time to go back to school for this, and nor do they have the money to invest in going back to school for this. And I'm just going to call y'all out. Stop using that term. So now to segue back, my teenagers and the adults I teach, it's not always, if they watch my stuff, they know not to use the word self-taught and they don't think about it this way. But a lot of them have come to me with their sketchbooks and they're like, why am I not getting any better? And I'm like, well, are you using the internet? No. Are you copying illustrations you like into your sketchbook to figure out how that artist thinks? Are you doing style tests? No. Are you working from photographs and working from reference, copying the reference so you can internalize it? No. Are you checking books out of the library? Are you Googling how to do things? Are you looking at your favorite artists and seeing if they share any tips or tricks? No. Well, why not? Well, I want to be a self-taught artist, and I'm like, or they think that a self-taught artist should already know how to do these things, shouldn't need to look these things up, shouldn't need to ask for help, and then they beat themselves up because they are not this thing. Y'all, nobody is this thing. No, at this point in time, very, very, very few children, young children are self-taught artists because they are just going with their gut and nobody is telling them how to do things. Not all children, but you hand a kid a crayon, they're gonna probably start drawing. Self-taught artists. But as we develop and we take in the world around us and we utilize the resources that exist in this world, which were put here by those who came before us so we can learn, when we say self-taught, it's like permission to not share the resources because that gets rid of the mythos of the self-made man and the self-taught artist. We feel like we don't need to share the tutorials that helped us get on our way because that eliminates the myth of the self-taught person. And I really want to work to dissemble. This is a pet peeve of mine. I think I am the only artist who hates this word, this joint of words as much. And I think it is because I was self-taught in the beginning, then I was self-directed, then I had some formal education, and now I teach online. I want to be very careful about how I say this because I'm not looking to call anybody out specifically and I'm not looking to alienate. I just want to change a mindset. I want to change how we think about these things. You're not a bad person if you've used this term. I've used the term. I don't hate you. I don't dislike you if you use the term. If you're one of those influencers who tells everybody you're a self-taught artist and then as you dig, you find out that they read a bunch of books and saw a bunch of tutorials and had a friend teach them, which they should have mentioned up at the top, I wish you would fix that language, but I don't hate you. I don't dislike you. I do think we're at contra points. We're at contra ends of a problem. My goal is to make art accessible. Because I think everyone who is able to make art, and there are a variety of different art forms, and there's something I believe for everyone, I think art truly makes your life richer. I think the ability to express yourself visually or musically, I think that is important. I think as humans, we are losing a lot by cutting out the humanities, by cutting out creative writing and poetry and music and singing and drawing and painting and carving. I think we're losing a lot. I think that accessing this in whatever capacity you need it or want it helps center you, helps calm you. It gives you something that you can feel good about. It gives you something to continue working on for yourself. It gives you the opportunity to meet other people who share your interests. It gives you something interesting to talk about that isn't just TV and Netflix. I think art in all its varied forms makes life worth living. Like, I believe this sincerely. And I was a writer before I was ever a comic artist. Like, that's why I went to art school, was because I was a writer who could not draw, and I wanted to learn how to draw because I wanted to be able to do my own stories. It was really important to me. And I want to share those tools with you guys so that you guys have the ability to do that if you so desire. The legacy I want to leave is that Becca was a good person who shared her knowledge. Becca was a good person who shared her resources. Becca was a community member in a time where we had this weird digital community that was constantly shifting and changing. Becca was a good egg. And when you erase Becca the educator from the conversation, I cease to exist. And I do make beautiful comics and I make beautiful art. But when you erase Becca the educator, you're also not talking about the art I'm making either. I cease to exist in entirety. And I see that happen with other art educators I know. And look, some of y'all are saints and y'all are like, I don't need to be remembered. This is why I make these things to share, is that back and forth. And I can't be the only person who wants this connection, who wants this community. So when you say the term, when we throw around the term self-taught, it's a period at the end of the sentence regarding how you got to where you got. It mystifies and obfuscates the artist's journey, and I don't like that. I might have ADHD, but I really like clarity. I really like disambiguation, and I really like boundaries. And when we throw around the term self-taught artist, some people understand that that means you're utilizing resources in the internet to direct your own education, and some people absolutely do not. And I would like us all to start using other words to describe this self-directed education. Literally, school of internet is one of my favorite terms because that is what it is. You are using the internet to school yourself. And I think it sounds kind of cute. I would make school of internet graduating class shirts. That would be kind of cute. Self-directed education. I'm also a big fan of that. Any terms that don't delete the teacher from your education, who don't delete the resources, who don't delete the inspiration, I am a fan of. So I am a big fan of you guys taking your art education into your own hands and deciding what you need. Some of us need more one-on-one guidance and thus need formal art education, or we need to be able to join groups or classes. We need that one-on-one feedback. We need that one-on-one validation. We need that time. Some people don't need that. Some people can look at an image and feel inspired and utilize their inspiration to bring that to life on a screen or a page. Some people already have the fine motor skills and the developed eyesight and the developed analytical thinking, and they really need very minimal. They just need ideas. Some people need a very detailed step-by-step photos and text. Some people need video to show how it's done. We all have different educational needs, and there are creators like myself who are doing their best to try to address at least two of those arenas. You can't always hit them all. There's limited time in the day. And one of the other things that really bothers me about this topic is circling back to the influential artists / art influencers. They are profiting from this term. They sell classes. Some of them sell very expensive classes. So if you're self-taught, why would you take their class? And if they're self-taught, and we're going by the literal definition of self-taught, why would I pay you to teach me? What is there about you that I should trust? And I'm not saying that because you might have gotten where you've gotten being self-taught, but how can you teach someone else to replicate it? So I also want to make it clear, I think artists need a few different things, okay? In order to teach and give advice. You either need a formal education, you either need experience. We'll start with the formal education. So my formal art education did teach me something about making art, but that isn't anything I frankly could not have gotten online. What it really truly taught me was how to give critique and receive critique, which is something I think people are not taught enough, especially fellow artists. And it also taught me how to teach. And that was why I went for my master's degree, is I wanted to know how to teach art. I love art, so I went in wanting, I didn't want to teach at K through 12, but I wanted the ability to offer classes. I wanted the ability to offer workshops, and a master's degree doesn't necessarily do that for you. I graduated with a lot of people who would not be good teachers, but while I was at SCAD, I did multiple teaching internships, and my mom's a teacher. So it was definitely something I wanted to learn how to do while I was there, and I made it a point to learn how to do so. School of Internet cannot necessarily teach you how to teach. I would argue it doesn't teach you how to teach. I am still learning, and I get a lot of feedback from my mother, the veteran teacher, and I was getting a lot of feedback from my aunt, the veteran kindergarten teacher. I do actually think if you go for a formal art education, and again, it does not have to be a master's degree, it could be community education. Any environment where there are regular critiques, you're expected to put your work up, you're expected to take feedback, you're expected to give feedback, you're expected to comport yourself in a fairly professional manner. I would argue that counts. We're teaching the teenagers in Art Squad how to give critique. They are so good at giving critique. They took to it like little ducks in water. Ducks in water, not ducks giving critique. So I think many people can learn how to do this. Now, little tip, as an ADHD person with RSD, if you are getting critiques, you may feel frustrated, angry, upset. You may have an RSD reaction to getting criticism on something that you worked so hard on. This is what I do. I just write it all down in my sketchbook. I don't even try to internalize it in the moment. I just write it in my sketchbook and I read it when I've calmed down. That way, no hard feelings, no RSD. If I need to, I can ask clarifying questions, but I try to be as analytical in taking notes about the critique as I possibly can be. And that way I don't have that RSD reaction. And that is a reaction I see a lot when giving other adults critiques that they themselves solicited. Another thing you learn, and I don't know if all art schools teach this, but this was something I learned both at my little local college and at SCAD, was about you don't get defensive during critiques. Even if they're wrong, you can just ignore it. You do not have to do everything. Look, if I took the advice of SCAD, I'd have a completely different art style 10 years ago, and maybe they were right and maybe they were wrong, but I had to do me. You take what is useful, you take what is helpful, you take what is designed to help you grow, and you just leave the rest in your sketchbook. Maybe you'll decide to revisit it, maybe it will be helpful later. It doesn't all have to be done today. So learning how to implement the critique was also very beneficial. You can also learn in a more formal art education setting, and this might be just hanging out with art friends who talk about making art and talk about their favorite resources and talk about art supplies, and y'all do this on the regular. You learn how to research art. You learn how to educate using online resources. You learn how to find the education style, the practice style that works best for you. So for me, when I was going through Andrew Loomis and Glenn Vilppu, I am extremely forgetful. I cannot just read the book. I will not internalize it. So what I did is I read the book, took notes, copied their illustrations, like sketched out their illustrations, and then I would find similar subject matter, whether online reference or in-person reference, and then redraw it, applying what I learned, taking notes the whole time. Over and over and over again. I had sketchbooks full of this. It might be why I have such bad arthritis now, is I put a lot of wear and tear in my hand, because it takes a lot for me to learn. But I was in undergrad, I was living in the dorm, all of my roommates were artists, so it was extremely inspiring, and it really pushed me to push myself, which is something I really needed, because even though I started making comics at 13 and made comics every day through school, I don't make comics every day now, but I'm still pretty active in making comics. Again, arthritis. I wasn't improving at all. And it was being surrounded by other artists, seeing what they were working on, seeing how they were learning, looking at the resources, and just feeling inspired, that really helped me. And the term self-taught just totally blocks you out from that because it's self and taught. You are teaching yourself. So to recap, if you are directing your own art education, if you are learning at your own pace through materials that you find online and in person or from friends helping you, or looking at other artists and analyzing their work, wonderful, good for you. I am so proud of you. If that is working for you, fantastic. For real, absolutely no problem with self-directed learning. If you are doing that and you're in an art group, excellent, bueno. If you are doing that and going to classes of any type, whether they're free at the library or community education or college level classes or an atelier, or you're mentoring under, apprenticing under someone, you're someone's mentee, wunderbar, perfect. There is nothing wrong with any of those things. Some people need more directed education. Some people don't. Some people have learning disabilities and need learning accommodations. Some people don't. All of those paths are valid. Oh, I remembered. So something that also kind of gets me is when I'm talking to other artists and they're talking about their degrees in other fields. And then I mention that I have 2 degrees in art, and I don't think I'm better than them. I have some learning disabilities, and formal art education was beneficial for me. It helped me do the things I wanted to be able to do. I wish I could continue that because I feel like my art has stagnated in many ways, but hand disabilities are fun. It immediately starts becoming about, but you don't need formal art education. You don't need to go to college for art. And it's like, I am not dunking on your degrees. I actually have a minor in Earth Environmental Science, but I'm not over here talking smack because you are both an artist and another thing. I think having a day job that is not art related is fantastic. It's going to give you more experience. It's going to give you more people to talk to about your art. That's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with a day job. I don't understand why every single time it becomes about immediately undermining my choices to pursue formal art education. So there is a little bit more I want to point out. If it weren't for people who have experience or formal training sharing what they know on the internet, we would not have the resources we have now. Those people who are now art influencers would not be art influencers. They had to learn from somewhere. If people didn't share their experiences, the stuff they learned from their mentors, the stuff they learned in college or in graduate school, the stuff they learned on a worldwide trip where they got to study under other artists, the stuff they learned from their friends who benefited from education or mentorship or experience, if they didn't share what they learned on the internet, we would not have this. I was inspired by the art blogs in 2007 to 2009. The Temple of the Seven Golden Camels was a huge influence on me and shared so many wonderful resources. James Gurney has shared so much knowledge over the years, knowledge that came from study and from experience. So when we say we are self-taught, when we put down people or negate the importance that formal education might have for some people, we are kind of kicking out the foundations for all the free art education that's available online. And while I don't want to make anybody feel bad, I don't want to make you feel like you're less of an artist or you have less to share or your art is less valid, I genuinely don't feel that way. One of the things I learned in art school was to be grateful for those who came before us. A big saying at SCAD was that we stand on the shoulders of giants. We would not be the artists that we are if it weren't for the people who came before us. And that is why I really, really hate the term self-taught. Is it negates, it gets rid of the shoulders that we're standing on. And I hope that here on the channel, you can see, I mean, I've talked about it a lot over the years. Maybe I haven't talked about it as much as I should. Maybe I should do a whole vlog about who has inspired and influenced me and who has taught me. And if you're interested in that, let me know. But we act like when we say the word self-taught, at least the way I take it, we act like we did this all by ourselves. And not only is that anti-community, and artists, especially in the age of AI, we desperately need community and solidarity, but it also completely erases those who gave up something to teach us and those whose work lit a fire in our hearts. And to me, art is all about communication. Whether I am communicating with the past by setting my books in Louisiana, whether I am communicating my love of nature, or whether I am communicating works of artists who left a great impact on me with the art style that I have and how they've influenced my art. And I don't want to trash that legacy. And I don't want people who just don't know better because the person they look up to mistaught them. I don't want to see this continue to slide into this weird every person for themselves, we all learn by ourselves, every man is an island thing. The internet, the art internet, at least for my life, has had waves, right? There was a time when something awful was really good for art resources. I think that time has long since passed. There was a time when YouTube was really good for art resources, and there's still some holdouts who share tutorials and share tips and share what they know, even though it is honestly very much not profitable. There was a time when art blogs were a huge thing, and you could learn so much by people sharing their art school experiences and their animation experience and their professional comics experience. There was a time when Tumblr was a big deal and people would share all these free tutorials. Things come and go, and when you take the little nod of recognition, when you take the flowers away from the art educator, we are increasingly de-incentivized to share what we know. If people don't acknowledge the things that I've done that have helped them, not only can I not grow an audience because no one's talking about my stuff, and on the internet, recommendation and word of mouth are huge, but I lose my reason for doing this, because the reason I like to do this is I want to feel like I contribute something to the world, and that the things in my head and the knowledge that I have and the grad school education that I paid for, those have value not just to myself, but to other people. And not only do they have value, but people are willing to say something about it. But I also think with such gratitude to the art resources that I utilized when I was learning and still utilize. And also, I have noticed it is increasingly difficult to find good art resources, especially for comic and cartoon art. Google is not making it easy. AI is making a lot of us super depressed. And they're just, with Tumblr being kind of wibbly wobbly and Twitter dying and Facebook and Instagram being on the same boat as Facebook and TikTok being relatively ephemeral, it is increasingly hard to find good free online resources for art. And I don't want that to entirely disappear. And I know people are making things. I know they're making things. And the internet is making it hard to find those things. And that is also why good word of mouth, and not for just the shiniest stars, not just for Proco, but for everybody who helps you, everyone you watch, everyone who you read, everyone who inspires you and helps you. That is important. We can't all be Proco. Some of us gotta be Becca. So, some good terms. If you're like on board now, and you're like, yeah, okay, I don't want to say self-taught anymore. I don't like that. I get where Becca's coming from. Self-directed education, school of internet, self-directed, self-guided, self-motivated, learning at your own pace. Or you could just not say self-taught and just say you're an artist. It's like getting rid of the aspiring before artist. Just say you're an artist. Just embrace it. We don't have to. I feel like when we try, and I'm guilty of this too, so maybe this is why I can say this. When we trot our education out first, whether it's self-taught or whether it's went to school and have a BFA, have a BA, have an MFA, it is a little bit because we're trying to prove our worth in a world that doesn't value us. But I I don't have a solution, frankly. If we could just all just be like, this is my art right here. This is what I do immediately. And people would just like look at our art and judge us based on the value of our portfolio, of our webcomic. I would be good with that. I have zero problem with people being judged either by what they know in theory, like what they can write about and what they can demonstrate, or being judged based on the quality of the art or the body of art or the consistency of art that they can produce. In terms of being an artist, not in terms of being a person, okay? Like, those are not the same two things. But unfortunately, people are lazy and they want it very quick. And I mean, I gotta tell you, down here, when I tell people I'm an artist, they often think, I don't know, they act like I'm on the same level as their 4-year-old. So I have to throw that MFA out there. And I don't like it because I know it makes other artists who are just as skilled and just as hardworking and educated, but in a very different way, feel like I am making a judgment call about them when I am simply trying to defend my own existence. So let's work together to come up with some solutions, to come up with some solidarity, to come up with some community, so that we are not negating the educators who taught us. And that's what I think the word self-taught means. But we are celebrating ourselves, celebrating our inspirations, celebrating our legacy, celebrating our artistic heritage, and keeping the ball rolling for future generations of artists. So, what I want you guys to do to further our goals, I listed some of the influential artists and blogs, but I'll give you some more recommendations so we can leave on a great foot. I really like the Glenn Vilppu drawing manual. He's done some demonstrations. Guy is super duper old, but super cool. He's done some demonstrations on Proko. The way I construct bodies, the way I learned how volumetric drawing, I learned from both Paul Hudson while I was at SCAD, but that was more an expansion on the methods taught by Glenn Vilppu. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in drawing people, Glenn Vilppu is a wonderful way to start. I also learned from Andrew Loomis the way he constructs the skeleton, and the way he simplifies the skeleton into a very glorified stick figure is also really helpful. His perspective books, I learned perspective reading his and then reading this really excellent Watson and Guptill text on perspective, and I kind of read them at the same time and they kind of filled in the gaps for one another. There is this comic artist, super funny guy. He has 2 books on perspective, and while these didn't teach me perspective, his asides actually helped me better grasp some of the concepts he's talking about and some of the concepts they're talking about in the books. So those are just like they're fun. Some of the concepts are kind of complicated, but I think they're well worth checking out. Something Chelsea, maybe David Chelsea. So everybody talks about Scott McCloud and how he is a seminal for understanding comics. If you would like the comics grad school theoretical experience, understanding the theory of comics, Scott McCloud is just considered like the go-to resource. There are a lot of resources that have come out since, but he's kind of the de facto, and I would still highly recommend his first 2 books. And I will have links in the description below of all these books. They're Amazon links, so they're affiliate links. Thank you so much for your support. Who else? Drawing Words and Writing Pictures by Jessica Abel and Matt something or other. ADHD Brain is fun. Also really good. Has a bunch of projects in it, so you could, that and the Scott McCloud books could almost be like an at-home comics graduate program, because you can apply what you're learning in the Scott McCloud books to the exercises in the Drawing Words and Writing Pictures books, and that will give, of course, you want to solicit critique. You do want to get feedback on these things. Feedback is how we learn and grow and develop an eye and develop taste. Mastering Comics is also very good. There are a bunch of great Japanese manga and art books that teach you drawing techniques. I believe one of them is called Pen and Ink, and it's got a bunch of shonen creators, and it didn't look like it would be as good as it is, but it is really, really good. What else? If we're going to talk about theory, obviously the 2 Hayao Miyazaki books that are full of his essays, well worth a read just to kind of get into that artist mindset and figure out who you are. That's actually where I decided that I needed to tell a story set in Southeast Louisiana, because he talks about finding and really using your authentic self, who you are at your core, to tell more impactful stories. That's why his stories have the themes they have. And that was like my permission to tell stories set in Louisiana. Even if nobody wants to pay for stories set in Louisiana, it was important to me. And I think that was in Starting Point. So it's Starting Point and Turning Point. The documentaries about Miyazaki are also great. I'm not like a huge Miyazaki fangirl because I don't like how he's treated some of his female employees. You can literally see this in the documentaries, and I don't like how he's treated his son. But I love the storytelling and I love the art. So I have been a fan of Studio Ghibli, and I'm a fan of Studio Ponok, and I like the work that his son has done. So I like the ideas that have come and the art that has come from his work. Not necessarily a fan of him as a person. See, sometimes you got to separate the artist from the person, which is hard. I'm not a big death of the artist kind of person, believe it or not. Who's surprised? The woman who makes online art resources wants her comic to be judged positively for her resources, and her resources to be positively judged for a comic. Who knew? What else there's so many good things. I just have to like think about it, because I want to leave you guys on a positive note. I want to leave you guys with some inspiration and with some things that you can take moving forward and you can use in your own artistic life and to guide your own artistic endeavors. Now, I'm a comic artist at my heart, at my core, primarily. So the artist who taught me how to watercolor is Electric Abyss at Electric Abyss. They are so good. If you like Genshin Impact, you're gonna love Electric Abyss's art. They post on, I know they post on Instagram. They used to be on Tumblr. They might still post to Tumblr, but I know you can find them on Instagram. We're still friends. They're still a wonderful person. I think you should check out their art. I think if you like my art, you will like Electric Abyss's art as well. They're the ones who taught me how to watercolor, as well as David Gildersleeve, who is now, unfortunately, since passed away. That was really rough news to read. My experiences with him at SCAD was he was just such a kind and gentle person, and I'm really grateful for his presence, and his watercolor was really cool, and it was very illustrative, and I wanted to bring that into my own work as well. So he was a really big influence on my work. Oh boy, books on, see, I'm going to lean on books because I also like book resources. In fact, I am currently going through a bunch of art influencers watercolor books and writing notes. And the ones who have watercolor palettes, I'm going to do the book review and the palette review in the same video. And the ones who don't, I'm just going to save all of those and do a big review of several modern, fairly popular watercolor books at some point to help you guys out. It's been an educational and enriching experience for me. So far, I have read Christy Rice's Painting for Joy's Sake, and I think there was a lot of really interesting exercises on brush strokes that are well worth investigating. And I'm now reading Macchino's No Fail Watercolor, which I am enjoying, but I don't want to spoil the review, so you guys will have to check it out. So I will rack my brain to think of more. Drawn to Life Volume 1 and 2 by Walt Stanchfield. He worked for Disney. He actually taught at Disney. So Disney animators were required to go to these continuing education classes that were provided by the studio. And he was one of the lecturers. And Volume 1 and 2 is a compilation of his lectures. So good. I read those when I was in grad school. I read the first one before grad school, and then I read the second one while I was in grad school. I still have them. I need to reread them. Excellent. They are full of handwritten notes from when I was younger, because I used to write up my books. Highly recommend those as well. And, Blue Period. So if you're looking for this is a manga. I really like this manga. I won't say it's perfect, but I really like this manga. If you are looking for almost like an art school experience, a more generalized, not comics-based art school experience, Blue Period is great. It's about this young man who has fallen in love with art, and he's had to actually teach himself, not self-taught, but he's had to he is not a natural born artist. He doesn't have that inclination. His parents are not artists. His friends are not artists. So he has to seek out teachers and friends and inspiration. And he goes to this art prep school, and it is really good and it's really inspiring. And he even touches on some topics about whether or not you're good enough and whether or not art school is right for you and whether or not this is the path you want to take. And I think it's still ongoing. There is an anime. I don't really like the anime. I love the manga. The reason I am recommending the manga is in the first 3 to 4 volumes, there's a lot of art exercises that he learns that is explained to us, the reader, and a lot of examples given. And I kind of want, when the series wraps, I kind of want to just do all of the exercises from Blue Period and see how that goes. Like we could do it like a book club. So if you want sort of an art school experience without paying for art school, Blue Period might be a good way to kind of generate that at home. So hopefully you guys heard me out. Maybe I've convinced some of you guys to change your language just a smidgen to acknowledge the inspirations and educations that gotten you to where you are. That was some language there. The people who've inspired you and the people who have educated you to this point now. Hopefully, as an artist, you will develop a pride for that heritage. That is something they teach, at least in my experience with art school, is to be proud of your influences because they are part of what makes you who you are. Just like some people are proud of their genealogy. Be proud of your art influences and own them and talk about them with people so other people can fall in love with them. It's a great, like, if you like this, then you like that kind of thing. And I hope that this has at least been amusing. I hope it's been helpful, maybe even informative. I would make sure you check the description below. But I think there are still some really good art resource channels, and I will try to remember to link those for you guys down in the description below. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for another art chat. Also, if you're new here, please take a moment and check out some of my playlists that I'm going to link for you guys. I'm going to link How to Draw Anything, or it might be called How to Draw Everything. ADHD Brain is a fun brain. That is my 3-class course on how to draw using volumetric construction. I show you how I draw things, so maybe that will help you. It's totally free. That'll be down in the description. I will also share making comics and zines. It's a huge playlist that I recorded while teaching a class by the same name 3 times with Nashville Community Education. It is a 6-week class, so it's basically broken up into 6 classes. There's a lot of great drawing, inking, comic making, zine making, inspiration, tutorials in that playlist. I really hope you guys will check that out. I am going to link Watercolor Crash Course. It is a 7-class crash course on watercolor that should teach you all the basics. And I will also link How to Draw and Paint People, which is what it sounds like, how to draw people and how to paint people. And that should cover the bread and butter of what I do here on the channel. Those are some of my favorite playlists. They are some of the things that I've worked incredibly hard on, and I hope you guys I hope you guys will check them out and avail yourself of them. And if you find them useful, helpful, and informative, please share them. Share them! Share them on Tumblr, on Pinterest, on Facebook, on Reddit. Share them on Discord. Share them on Blue Sky. Share them on Instagram. Share them on Threads. Help me help more people. It really means a lot to me. And also, after you check the description below for my recommendations, my recommended resources, why don't you leave some of your own favorite hidden gems that deserve more love, more money, more recognition down in the comments below for me and other people to check out. And if you are also making your own tutorials and resources, feel free to link that as well. Because look, if we don't represent ourselves, if we don't plug ourselves, we can't count on anybody else to. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for another comic artist rant. And I will see you guys again with another art supply review, tutorial, or artist vlog.